Get out of my sight now! No!
The storm came down like it was washing the world clean. Rain beat against the diner windows, blurring the red glow of the neon sign that read, Marley's Diner, open late. Inside, it was quiet except for the low hum of the fridge and the slow squeak of a mop on tile. Danielle Carter, a tired waitress with kind eyes and rough hands, was finishing her last shift of the week. Her feet ached, her tips were light, and her rent was due in 3 days. Still, she kept wiping the tables one by one, the way her manager liked them, spotless. When she reached table 7, her hand stopped. There, half hidden under a napkin, was a black leather wallet. It looked expensive, smooth, thick and stitched along the edges with care. She picked it up. The smell of polished leather mixed with the faint scent of cologne. Inside, she saw cash, a lot of it, neat stacks of $100 bills. Her breath caught. She pulled out a platinum card, the kind only rich people carried. Then a silver business card. Richard Harlow, Harlow Industries. She didn't know the name, but it sounded big. Danielle looked around the diner. Empty booths. The rain outside made it hard to see the road. The only sound was thunder rolling like slow applause. She sat for a moment at the edge of the booth, holding the wallet. Her heart beat faster. She thought about her life. The overdue bills, the note from the landlord, the text from her little brother asking for school money she didn't have. One envelope from this wallet could change everything? No one would know. The security camera in the corner had been broken for months. Her reflection in the window looked back at her, tired and unsure. She whispered to herself, what would Dad say? A memory flickered. Her father in his workshop, oil stains on his hands, telling her, doing right when no one's watching. That's who you really are. The thunder outside grew louder as if echoing his words. She closed the wallet. Her hands trembled slightly. Then came the headlights. A flash of white light swept across the diner wall. Tires screeched on the wet road. A black car, long, sleek, and far too new for this old place, pulled up in front. Danielle froze. The car door opened. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out, holding his coat over his head as he ran through the rain. Behind him, another man jumped out with a camera. Danielle's eyes widened. The front door burst open with a rush of cold air. The man looked around the diner, water dripping from his coat. His voice was sharp, impatient, but calm enough to sound practiced. "Excuse me," he said, locking eyes with her. "Did anyone leave a wallet here?" "Black leather. Very important." Danielle looked down at the wallet still resting in her hand. Her throat tightened. For a moment, she said nothing. The man's shoes clicked against the floor as he walked closer. She noticed the camera now pointed at her. He smiled. But it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind that belonged to someone who knew the world usually said yes to him. Danielle placed the wallet on the counter slowly. "Found it on table 7, she said quietly. "I was about to check the name." The man's smile widened. "You're an honest one. That's rare these days." He turned toward the cameraman. "You got that?" Danielle's brow furrowed. "Got what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward the camera as if the rain-soaked night outside didn't exist. "Just need a quick shot of gratitude. You returning the wallet, me saying thank you. Makes for a good story." Danielle blinked, confused. The wallet still sat between them, glistening under the diner's flickering light. She didn't know yet who he was. She didn't know that this simple act, returning what wasn't hers, was about to put her face in front of millions. But as the camera lens focused on her, and the storm continued to rage outside, a quiet thought crossed her mind. Sometimes, the smallest choices decide the biggest stories. The diner door swung open with the force of a movie scene, and the storm's echo followed him in. Richard Harlow stood in the doorway, tall, confident, and untouched by the chaos outside. His dark suit looked too fine for a roadside diner, the kind stitched by someone who never missed a thread. Behind him came 2 assistants holding umbrellas and a cameraman adjusting his lens. Red light blinking. The bright light from the camera cut through the dim diner glow, making everything suddenly sharper. The silver napkin holder, the raindrops sliding down the window, and Danielle's uneasy face. Richard brushed a bit of water from his sleeve. "You must be the one who found my wallet," he said, his tone smooth but rehearsed like someone used to hearing yes. Danielle nodded slowly. Yes, sir. I found it on table 7. He gave her a broad smile. Honesty, he said, loud enough for the camera to catch it. That's what keeps America strong. The cameraman moved closer, filming her from an angle that made her blink. One assistant whispered into a small microphone, We're rolling. Danielle's stomach tightened. She hadn't realized this was being filmed. The man hadn't even asked. She stood frozen, the wallet in her hand. Richard gestured for her to step forward. Let's do that again, he said to the cameraman. Get a clean take. I'll walk in, say my line, and she'll hand me the wallet. The words hit her wrong. Do it again, like she was an actor in someone else's story. Danielle looked down at the wallet. Black leather, polished, perfect. It didn't belong in a place like this. Neither did he. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, the air grew tight. Ready? Richard said, flashing a practiced grin. Danielle hesitated, unsure. Sir, I already gave it back. He cut her off with a kind laugh that wasn't kind at all. Just for the camera. Don't worry. It's for a good cause. He stepped into position again, voice booming with false warmth. This is what real integrity looks like. America's heartland, still full of honest folks. Danielle blinked under the glare of the light. Her hands shook slightly as she held out the wallet again. Thank you, Richard said for the camera, smiling like a man signing a deal. People like you remind us there's hope left. The cameraman gave a thumbs up. Got it. Richard turned back to Danielle, lowering his voice. Perfect. You'll be on Harlow Cares next week, our charity series. Millions of views. You'll thank me later. She didn't answer. Her eyes flicked to the pie she'd served earlier, still sitting on table 7 untouched, its whipped cream now melting under the diner's buzzing light. It looked like something sweet left to spoil. One of the assistants whispered, We should go, sir. Next shoot's in Macon. Richard nodded and checked his gold watch. Let's move. He turned back to Danielle with a quick handshake. You did good tonight. Then, just as suddenly as they came, they left. The sound of heels, camera gear, and the slam of the door fading into the rain. The neon light outside blinked again, washing the empty booth in red and blue. Danielle stood alone. The same spot, but the air felt heavier now. The smell of rain mixed with the faint trace of his cologne. Expensive, cold, unforgettable. She wiped her palms on her apron and looked toward the dark parking lot. The black car had already disappeared, its taillights fading into the storm. Everything about what just happened felt wrong. Too smooth. Too fast. Too clean. For a moment she wondered if she'd just been thanked. Bruised, the pie on the table had gone cold. The whipped cream slid down its side, leaving a pale streak on the plate. A small, silent symbol of something real ruined by pretense. Danielle turned off the diner lights, the storm still echoing outside, and whispered to herself, That didn't feel like honesty. The camera lens stared at her like an unblinking eye. Cold, silent, demanding. Danielle Carter stood behind the counter, apron still damp from the night storm. Across from her, Richard Harlow adjusted his cufflinks and gave a smooth nod to the director. Let's do one more take, he said, voice steady, like someone rehearsing kindness. The cameraman lifted his shoulder rig again. Lights brightened, washing the diner in a glare that killed its warmth. The silver napkin holders gleamed like mirrors. The empty booths looked staged, lifeless. All right, miss, said the director, chewing gum as he pointed toward her. When he says thank you, I want you to look more surprised. Big smile, soft eyes. Feel it, okay? Danielle blinked, confused. You want me to pretend? He smirked. Pretend? No, just make it look real. The words sank like stones. Make it look real. Richard positioned himself again at table 7, the same booth where it all started. His untouched slice of pie sat there, now pale and cold, its sweetness gone. Danielle glanced at it, feeling something twist inside her. Ready? The director shouted. And action. Richard turned to her, voice rising with performative charm. This young woman right here found my wallet and proved that honesty still lives in small-town America. He extended his hand. She hesitated, then took it. The handshake was firm, practiced. Cut! The director frowned. No. Danielle smiled, like you're proud. You're on TV. Danielle tried again. Another take, then another. Each time it felt less real. Each thank you from Richard sounded emptier than before, like someone complimenting their own reflection. Cut. One more, the director said again, sighing. This time more emotion, less awkward. Let's make it sparkle. Danielle swallowed hard. The camera light hit her face. Sweat collected at her hairline. She forced a smile, the kind that felt borrowed. Perfect, Richard said after the 5th take, turning to the crew. That's our shot. The world needs stories like this. The crew nodded, already packing equipment. Someone laughed about catching their flight to Miami. Danielle stood still, the glare fading as the lights clicked off. Her hands trembled slightly. Around her, the diner returned to its quiet self. The hum of the fridge, the distant thunder, the smell of burnt coffee. For a moment, she stared at the pie on the table. The cream had melted into the crust, leaving a pale puddle on the plate. Earlier that night, she had baked it herself. Warm, soft, sweet. Now, under the leftover heat of the camera lights, it looked spoiled. Richard noticed her gaze. We'll send someone tomorrow with the release forms, he said casually. You'll be on the Harlow Foundation homepage by next week. Congratulations. Danielle didn't answer. He smiled again, that same photo-perfect smile, and walked out. Coat over his arm, surrounded by chatter and equipment. The camera crew followed him into the night, their reflections gliding across the wet glass doors like ghosts leaving a stage. When the door shut, the silence was complete. Danielle sat at table 7. The neon light outside flickered again, painting her face in alternating red and blue. She looked at her own reflection in the window. Tired eyes, smudged makeup. A woman who had done the right thing but felt wronged. The camera hadn't blinked once. It had recorded everything. Her hesitation, her discomfort, her forced smile. And somehow it had turned the truth into a product. She whispered to herself. Barely audible. Honesty shouldn't need retakes. Her eyes drifted back to the pie, cold, untouched, symbolic of what the moment had lost. The storm outside began to fade, but the unease inside her didn't. Somewhere beyond the parking lot, the car engine started. She could still hear Richard's voice through the glass. Confident and careless, talking about good optics. Danielle stayed still, watching the pie, the plate, and the faint reflection of the red light blinking from the camera left on the counter. Still recording, still watching, refusing to blink. The fluorescent light above the counter buzzed like a restless memory. Danielle stood alone in the quiet diner, her reflection faint in the dark window. The storm had passed, but her mind hadn't. The camera crew was gone. The laughter, the orders, the noise, all of it had faded. What stayed was the echo of Richard Harlow's voice saying, "It's for a good cause." She sank into one of the booths, the same table 7, and rubbed her hands together. They smelled faintly of dish soap and coffee grounds. The wallet was gone now, but its weight still lingered in her palms, heavy with something that money couldn't buy. Then, in the hum of silence, her mind drifted back to Macon, Georgia years ago. She was 10. The world was simpler then, but the lessons were not. Her father worked at a small mechanic shop off Highway 41, where the smell of oil and metal hung thick in the air. He was a tall man, always with a smudge of grease on his cheek and a steady calm in his voice. That afternoon, she remembered standing by his side as he wiped his hands on a rag. A customer had dropped a gold watch into the toolbox by mistake, an expensive one. Danielle watched him pick it up, look at it for a moment, then walk straight to the office and leave it on the counter. She had asked, "Daddy, why didn't you keep it?" He wouldn't even know. Her father smiled softly, his eyes kind but firm. "Integrity," he said, "is what you do when nobody's filming." He bent down, met her eyes, and tapped her chest gently. "Right here, Danny. That's where you decide who you are." The memory faded like a photograph in the rain. Now, sitting in the empty diner, Danielle could still hear his words, clear, steady, and unshaken. When nobody's filming, but tonight someone had been filming. And what they wanted wasn't truth, it was performance. She looked around the diner again. The camera light had left a faint glow on the counter, like a stain that hadn't yet faded. Outside, the puddles reflected the neon sign, Marley's Diner, flickering in uneven rhythm, like a broken heartbeat. She realized then that she had let them use her father's lesson as their script. They had packaged honesty into a slogan, sold it for views, and walked away smiling, her throat tightened. Not from anger, but from disappointment. Not in them, but in herself. She rose slowly and switched off the last light, leaving only the sign outside to glow through the window. The diner sank into darkness, except for the red pulse of that neon flicker. Danielle whispered, almost to the empty air, "You taught me better." "Dad." The wind outside picked up, rustling the old American flag by the door. It sounded like a quiet applause, or maybe a reminder. As she locked the door and stepped into the cool night, one thought burned clear in her heart. Some things aren't meant to be filmed. Some truths only matter when no one is watching. The envelope sat on the counter like it had a heartbeat. Danielle Carter stared at it, thick, sealed, stamped with gold lettering that read, Harlow Industries. The morning sun had just started to push through the diner's blinds, striping the floor with lines of light. The smell of coffee filled the air, but her stomach turned at the thought of it. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that camera light, white, cold, and unblinking, recording her every move as if truth needed a director. The bell above the diner door jingled softly. A woman in a gray suit walked in, heels sharp against the tiles. She carried a folder under one arm and the same polite smile that never reached her eyes. "Miss Carter." Danielle nodded slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. "That's me. I'm Elaine Brooks, head of public relations for Mr. Harlow." She placed the folder on the counter with careful precision. "He asked me to bring you this." Danielle glanced down. The gold envelope was already there. Elaine slid it closer. $10,000, Elaine said smoothly, "as a thank you for your honesty. And," she tapped the folder, "we'd like your permission to use your story for our Honest Worker campaign. You'll be featured across our platforms." A real American story. Danielle didn't touch the envelope. She just stared at it. "10,000? Elaine nodded. "And a possible scholarship for your brother, too. Mr. Harlow was moved by your integrity." The word hit her like static, the same word her father used, now wrapped in marketing polish. Elaine continued, rehearsed and polished. "We'd like a photo of you smiling with the check. Maybe one holding a coffee pot. Authentic. People love the blue-collar angle." Danielle's jaw tightened. "Blue-collar angle?" "Yes," Elaine said, missing the weight behind the words. "You represent honesty. Hard work, simplicity. People need that image right now. Image, not truth." Danielle folded her arms. "You're not buying honesty," she said quietly. Elaine chuckled softly, though her eyes stayed cold. "Of course not. We're sharing it." The diner's air felt thick. The clock above the door ticked loudly, every second a question. Danielle looked at the envelope again, at the way the light made its edges glow. Her rent, her brother's tuition, the repairs her old car needed. For a moment she imagined saying yes. Taking the money, smiling for the camera, pretending it was all gratitude and no guilt. But then, she saw table 7 in her mind, the cold pie still untouched. The same one left behind by the man who thanked her for honesty while scripting her every word. She could almost hear her father again. "Integrity is what you do when nobody's filming." Elaine slid a paper toward her. "Just sign here and you'll be part of something bigger than yourself." Danielle looked up slowly. "Something bigger? Or something louder?" Elaine frowned slightly, unsure if it was a question or a challenge. Danielle took a breath. The smell of rain still clung to the air from last night, reminding her of the storm that had started everything. She placed her hand on the envelope, then pushed it back across the counter. Elaine blinked. "You're refusing?" "I'm keeping my story," Danielle said, steady and calm. "Not selling it." Elaine's polite mask cracked just a little. "You understand this was a generous offer?" "I do," Danielle replied. "And that's why I can't take it." For a moment, the only sound was the soft buzz of the neon sign outside. Elaine sighed, picked up the envelope and tucked it under her arm. "Suit yourself," she said. Her tone clipped. "You'll regret this." She turned and left, the bell above the door ringing sharply behind her. Danielle stood still for a long moment. The sunlight shifted, falling across the counter where the envelope had been. Now empty, but cleaner somehow. Her reflection in the diner window looked steadier than before. She smiled faintly, not for a camera, but for herself. Because sometimes the price of truth isn't money. It's saying no when the world expects you to say yes. The vending machine hummed like a restless thought. Danielle Carter sat alone in the diner's tiny break room. The kind with peeling paint, a crooked clock, and the smell of burnt coffee clinging to everything. The gold envelope lay on the table in front of her. Its shine didn't belong here. Not beside old sugar packets and chipped mugs. She stared at it for a long time. $10,000. Enough to pay the rent, fix the car, and keep her brother in school. Yet it looked heavier than any bill she had ever held. Outside, she could hear voices, laughter, movement, and the faint sound of a video playing. The camera crew had stayed behind to edit their footage. Through the half-open door, light flickered from their screens. "We'll crop that part out," one of them said, chuckling. "Make her look more emotional." Another voice joined in, calm, firm, and unmistakable. "Richard Harlow, just make sure it looks real," he said. "It's not about the story. It's about optics." Danielle froze. Optics. The word stung. She leaned forward, listening. One of the assistants laughed. "People eat this stuff up. Working woman, small-town diner, all that. Feels authentic." "Exactly," Richard replied. "Doesn't matter if it's authentic. It just has to feel that way." The words landed like small cracks in glass. Each one splintered something inside her. Her pride, her trust, her calm. She looked at the envelope again. It seemed different now. The same money, but tainted somehow. Not a gift, but a purchase. The vending machine clicked behind her, a can of soda dropping with a hollow sound. It startled her, but also stirred something. The sound wasn't noise anymore. It was clarity. The mechanical hum, the drop, the stillness afterward, it all felt like a message. She remembered her father's voice, soft, firm, unbreakable. Integrity is what you do when nobody's filming. Nobody was filming now. She stood up slowly, her reflection flickering in the metal door of the vending machine. For the first time in days, her face looked calm, not confused. Outside, the laughter kept going, careless, distant, rehearsed. She walked to the table, picked up the envelope, and turned it in her hands. The gold shimmered under the dull fluorescent light, but it no longer looked bright. It looked false, like gold paint over something hollow. For a moment, she imagined walking out there, handing it back, telling them what honesty actually meant. But not yet. Not in front of their cameras. Not while they could turn her truth into a clip. She slipped the envelope into her apron pocket. Not to keep it, but to carry the decision somewhere quieter, where the noise couldn't reach. Then she turned off the light, leaving the break room in soft darkness. The hum of the vending machine continued, steady and calm. No longer background sound, but a reminder. Some awakenings don't come from shouting. They come from silence, the kind that tells you who you really are. The lights were blinding, white, sharp, and hungry. A large banner hung behind the podium. Harlow Industries, honoring everyday integrity. Rows of cameras faced forward like soldiers ready to capture every angle. Microphones crowded the front edge of the stage, their red lights blinking in rhythm. At the center of it all stood Danielle Carter, wearing the same diner uniform she had worked in the night she found the wallet. The fabric was clean, pressed, but ordinary, a quiet contrast to the shimmering suits surrounding her. She didn't belong here. And yet she did. The host's voice echoed through the hall. "Today we celebrate honesty, hard work, and the American spirit. Please welcome our guest of honor, the woman who reminded us all that truth still matters, Miss Danielle Carter." Applause burst like fireworks. Cameras flashed. A dozen hands pointed lenses at her face. Danielle walked up slowly, every step heavier than the last. The gold envelope from yesterday, the one she had refused, still sat folded inside her jacket pocket, unopened, as a reminder of what not to become. Behind her stood Richard Harlow, smiling for the cameras, his teeth perfect, his posture rehearsed. He leaned toward the nearest microphone and said, "This young woman's integrity moved us all. Her story proves that doing right is always rewarded." Danielle turned slightly, her eyes finding his. His smile didn't reach them. It never had. A stage assistant handed her a small trophy, glass, polished, shaped like a flame. It gleamed under the lights, too perfect to feel real, She held it for a moment, saying nothing. Then the host whispered, "Go ahead, Miss Carter. Say a few words." Danielle stepped up to the microphone. The room went quiet except for the clicking of cameras. She could hear her own breath. Her reflection glimmered faintly in the award she held. A face caught between pride and something heavier. She took a slow breath and began, "Voice steady. I was told this award stands for integrity." A few nods from the crowd. Some smiled, expecting a grateful speech. "But," she continued, "integrity isn't something you can film, and it's not something you can buy airtime for." The room stiffened. The flashes slowed. Richard's smile faltered just slightly. Danielle looked out across the sea of faces. Reporters, executives, assistants, all watching her like they weren't sure if this was part of the script. "I didn't give back that wallet for cameras," she said. "I did it because it was the right thing to do. But then someone decided to turn that into a commercial. To make it look honest instead of being honest." Murmurs rippled across the room. The host shifted nervously. Danielle lifted the award slightly. "This," she said, "this isn't what truth looks like. Truth doesn't come with lights or applause. It comes in silence when no one's watching. When it's just you and the choice you have to make." The cameras began recording faster again, but now the room's energy had changed. This wasn't the story they expected. Richard stepped forward, forcing a chuckle. "Well, Miss Carter, I think what Danielle means to say is—" She cut him off gently, her tone calm but firm. "No, Mr. Harlow, I've said what I mean." The silence that followed was heavy, not awkward, but cleansing. She placed the trophy down on the podium. It landed with a quiet click, sharp enough to echo through the hall. "You can keep this," she said. "I don't need an award for doing what I was raised to do." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The reporters leaned forward, scribbling furiously. The flashes resumed, brighter, faster, relentless. Richard stood frozen, still smiling for the cameras, but the image no longer fit. Danielle turned and walked off stage. Her heart raced, but her steps were steady. She didn't look back. Outside the hall, the noise from inside followed her. Voices, questions, confusion. But the air beyond the glass doors felt real again. Cool, quiet, honest. She exhaled deeply and walked into the sunlight. By the time she reached the diner an hour later, her phone was already vibrating nonstop. Messages, calls, notifications. The video had spread. Someone had captured her words. "Integrity isn't something you buy airtime for." That clip, less than 20 seconds long, had been shared thousands of times before she even wiped her hands on her apron. In offices, classrooms, and homes, people replayed it again and again, not for the speech, but for the silence that came after. Inside the diner, the same old hum returned, coffee brewing, plates clinking, rain starting again outside. Danielle smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't need applause. The trophy was gone. The cameras had moved on. But what she said, that stayed, because sometimes truth doesn't need a stage. Just needs someone brave enough to say it. The diner was quiet again. No bright lights. No microphones. No strangers asking for interviews. Only the soft clatter of dishes, the faint hiss of the coffee machine, and the hum of normal life returning, slow, steady, honest. Danielle Carter moved between tables like she always did, refilling cups and greeting regulars. But something in the air had changed. People looked at her differently now, not with pity or curiosity, but with quiet respect. A week had passed since the press conference. The video had traveled everywhere, from TV screens to social feeds to morning shows. Her words, spoken calmly and without anger, had turned into something larger than she ever meant them to. Integrity isn't something you buy airtime for. Those 10 words had echoed far beyond the diners, whilst letters began arriving in small stacks every morning. Some were from strangers, teachers, truck drivers, single mothers. Others came from students who said her courage helped them speak up at school or at work. They didn't know her personally, but they felt they did. She read each one between shifts, tucking the kindest ones under the counter for safekeeping. The reporters eventually stopped calling. The headlines faded. The world moved on the way it always does. But one afternoon, as the sun began to dip and the diner filled with the smell of frying onions, an envelope arrived. Plain, white, and without a return address. Her name was written on the front in clean handwriting, D. Carter. She opened it carefully. Inside was a short note written on company stationery from Harlow Industries. It said only 4 words. You were right. R.H. Danielle stared at it for a long time. No apology, no check. Just truth. Simple, direct enough. She folded the note and walked to the back of the diner. On the small fridge behind the counter hung a faded photo. Her father, arms greasy from work, grinning beside a half-built engine. She slipped the note into the corner of the frame. It stayed there, tucked beside the man who had first taught her what honesty meant. Later that night, when the last customer left and the sign in the window flipped to closed, Danielle sat at the counter with a cup of coffee gone cold. She opened the drawer beside her and took out the wallet, the same one that had started everything. The leather was worn now, the edges dull. It was empty, but she couldn't bring herself to throw it away. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about what it represented. The moment she realized that truth only matters when it costs you something. She placed the wallet back in the drawer and smiled faintly. Outside, the wind brushed against the glass, soft and calm. The cameras had gone. The lights had faded. But what stayed was something stronger. A quiet kind of fame that didn't need attention. Only remembrance. As she turned off the last light, the diner's neon sign flickered one final time. Marley's Diner. Open late, glowing red against the night before going still. And for the first time in weeks, Danielle felt at peace. The neon sign flickered again. Months had passed since the storm. Since the speech, since the name Danielle Carter stopped making headlines. The world had moved on, but the diner stayed the same. Same chrome counters, same smell of coffee, same hum of the late-night lights. A new waitress worked the floor now. Maya Lopez, 19. Fast on her feet and new to small-town quiet. It was her 3rd week on the job. The night was slow. A few truckers, a couple on their phones, and one man sitting alone at table 7. When he left, the doorbell jingled and silence followed. Maya walked over with her rag and tray. The plate was clean, the cup half empty. But then she saw it. A wallet resting against the napkin holder, black leather and almost glowing under the flickering red-blue light. She froze. Looked around. No one seemed to notice. Her reflection stared back at her from the window. Young, uncertain, thinking. The wallet felt heavy when she picked it up. Inside, bills were neatly folded. A few cards and a single photo. A girl in a diner uniform smiling beside an older man. The handwriting on the back read, Marley's Diner, do what's right. Maya looked toward the door. The man's car lights blinked in the distance, then vanished into the dark road. For a moment, she stood there, caught between keeping and returning, between silence and honesty. Outside, the neon light shimmered on the chrome edge of table 7, same as it had months before. The test had come again. Different hands, same choice. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the diner, it felt like Danielle's voice still whispered through the walls. Integrity is what you do when nobody's filming.